my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu, very clear.
Okay, just one sec. I'll resize this. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We'll start with the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishay Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. I offer my most humble obeisances unto the spiritual masters by whose mercy even a lame man can cross mountains and even a dumb person can become an eloquent speaker. Okay, Hare Krishna. I seek blessings from all of you so that I can lead this discussion and we can discuss something within the precincts of the Guru Parampara and go closer to Krishna eventually. So this is the chapter titled Birth of Emperor Parikshit. So 12th chapter of the first canto. So it is a custom in any wherever Shastric study happens or wherever we kind of go deeper into Shastra, before discussing the Shastra, it's nice to glorify the Shastra. Even it goes with persons as well. Before discussing Lord Ram, for instance, Radhika Raman Prabhu was mentioning that he's a scholar, and before one of his non-devotee friends actually, who was in his own department, he said that, okay, before you get into any subject, you should glorify that subject. So it was a surprise for him that a non-devotee person is telling him to glorify something. So with that in mind, we'll first glorify Srimad Bhagavatam a little bit, and then we'll go on to the topic. So this is one of the fruits of hearing Bhagavatam, comes in Bhagavatam itself, 2.8.4. Shrinamata Shraddhaya Nityam Granatascha Swacheshtitam Kalena Nati Dirgena Bhagwan Vishate Riddhi. Persons who always hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. So kalena is time, na ati dirghena. So dirgha means prolonged period of time, na ati. Ati means too much and na means no. So kalena na ati dirghena, in not within a short time, that means not within a very long time. It won't take too long for what? For Bhagwan Vishate Riddhi, right? For the Lord to manifest within our heart. So this is one of the fruits of hearing Bhagavatam. We saw that series of verses in one of the previous chapters, Shrinatam Swakatha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana Riden Tastoya Abhadrani Vidhunuti Saratsatam. The Abhadrani, the whatever is not good within the heart, it gets cleansed by Shrinatam Swakatha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, right? And then that series goes on, and how the purification happens and how the heart starts longing for Krishna, right? And then one more glory of Srimad Bhagavatam, Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam, Shukamukad Amrita Drava Samyutam, Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam, Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha, right? A very famous verse of Bhagavatam where so I'll just read the translation. Expert and thoughtful men relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. So this is a very heavy thing because so Shastras work at various levels, and especially Srimad Bhagavatam works at the level of liberated souls as well as the level of sadhakas like us, right? Even the liberated souls relish the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is nice. And the word Galitam is very significant because Galitam means fully mature. Prabhupada translates this as the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. So a fruit can be there, but if it's not ripe, if it's raw, then it doesn't taste that well, right? But here Prabhupada is saying that the Bhagavatam is the mature fruit, the ripened fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures, right? And now this is actually a fact, and I heard one of Prabhupada's lectures where he says this, that any fruit, maybe those who are in India, those who are from India might know this, any fruit, when it's ripe, it is sweet, right? But then when it is tasted by a parrot, when the beak of the parrot touches the fruit, that fruit becomes even sweeter, right? Incidentally, Shukadev Goswami, his Swarupa is of a parrot in the palace of Radharani, in the place of Radharani. So Shukadev Goswami is Radharani's parrot, right? So because this Bhagavatam is emanating from the lips of Shukadev Goswami, it is becoming even more, even sweeter than it already is. So that is something really nice. And one of the things I like within the Shastras, within the scriptures, is cross-referencing. So it's not that every scripture is an independent body of knowledge and there is no connection between them. So for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita in 13.5, Krishna says, Rishibir Bahuda Gitam Chandobir Vividai Pritak Brahma Sutra Padesheva Hetu Madbir Vinishchitai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So now we are discussing the Gita. Krishna is discussing the Gita, wherein he's referencing Vedanta Sutras or the Brahma Sutras, right? So similarly, Bhagavatam itself will definitely, proclaim the glories of Bhagavatam. But is there any other scripture other than Bhagavatam which is proclaiming the glory of Bhagavatam? So that is what we'll see. So I'll not go into the verse here. So the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra is present in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The full purport of Mahabharata is also there. The commentary of the Brahma Gayatri is also there and fully expanded with all Vedic knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam is the supreme Purana, and it was compiled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his incarnation as Vyasadeva. There are 12 cantos, 335 chapters, and 18,000 verses. So this comes in Garuda Purana, and it was quoted in CC, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So yeah, with that glory and with that potency of Srimad Bhagavatam in mind, let's dive into the topic for today, which is the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, right? So Maharaj Parikshit, actually, we have to be very grateful to him, because it is because of him that we are all have the Bhagavatam that we have today. So had it not been for his steadfast devotion wherein he went to Shukdev Goswami when he was cursed, we'll see all that, and this will be covered in detail in the subsequent chapters as well. So if that had not been there, if Parikshit Maharaj had not done that, then we perhaps wouldn't have had the Bhagavatam. So we are really grateful to Maharaj Parikshit. So this is a quick breakdown. So questions by Sage Shaunaka. So Shaunaka Rishi is actually asking questions to Sutta Goswami in Naimisharanya on behalf of all the sages assembled there, right? And then Sutta Goswami starts replying to Shaunaka Rishi's questions. So firstly, he glorifies Yudhishthira Maharaj's administration. And then he talks about how Parikshit is saved in the womb of Uttara by Krishna. And then the birth of Parikshit, and then the glories of Parikshit, which was recited by the Jataka Vipras. So Vipras are actually one level below Brahmanas. So essentially, Veda Pathat Bhaved Vipra. So Janmana Jayate Shudra. Everybody is born as Shudra. Samskarat Bhaved Dvija. Okay, when samskaras take place, like samskaras, there are various samskaras or rites that happen in the Vedic life. Like one of them is Garbhadhan Samskar, one of them is the Simantonayanam Samskar, and one of them is Jataka Samskar. Jataka Samskar is when a baby is born, and they, based on the time of birth, these expert Vipras or these expert Brahminical people, they actually predict certain things, the various qualities that the baby is going to have, and certain events also that would take place in the life of the baby. So we'll see that from verses 18 to 31, and then finally the chapter ends with Yudhishthira Maharaj performing the Ashwamedha Yajna. Okay, and then we'll see some reflections, hopefully not speculations. So yeah, so just to set some background, let's go back 5,000 years, and we all know how the Pandavas lost their kingdom in the dice game in the Dyuta Sabha. And of course, we also know that the dice was rigged by Shakuni, who was the uncle of Duryodhan. So, and because of that, Yudhishthir loses everything: his brothers, his wife, his kingdom, everything. And then all of the Pandavas and Draupadi, they are sent for an exile of 13 years and an incognito period of 1 year. So this is really interesting. So 13-year exile is okay, like you have to be in the forest, but this 1 year of incognito period, this is a little tricky because you have to disguise yourself. Essentially, in that 1 year, you cannot be discovered by anyone. If you're discovered by anyone and if the king comes to know, then the whole cycle would start again. That was the condition laid down at the end of the dice game, that if the Pandavas are discovered in that 1 year of incognito, then they have to start the whole cycle of 13 years and this 1 year again. So it was quite a tricky thing. And then during this 1 year period, the Pandavas, they actually took shelter of the king of Virat. I don't remember if that region is called Virat, but I think the name of the king was Virat. So they take shelter of King Virat in his kingdom, and then all the Pandavas, they disguise themselves in various roles. Like Bhima was a cook, if I'm not wrong. So, and then Arjuna, he actually disguises himself as a eunuch, whose name is Brihanala. So, and then Brihanala is the dance teacher of the king's daughter, King Virat's daughter, called Uttara. And then certain events happen, I won't go into those. And then eventually King Virat comes to know who Brihanala really is, Arjun. So he understands that this is a great warrior who is in the form of a eunuch teaching dance to my daughter. And then when he discovers that, he offers his daughter Uttara in marriage to Arjun, right? But then Arjun says, look, I am in the role of a guru to your daughter. And a guru is always in the role of a father to his shishya or disciple. So I cannot marry Uttara, right? But I have a son, his name is Abhimanyu. So he can marry your daughter Uttara. That would be a nice match. And then Abhimanyu and Uttara get married. So Abhimanyu was also a great warrior, and a pure devotee again. And he was the son of Arjun and Subhadra. And Subhadra is, as we all know, Krishna's sister. And then Abhimanyu was actually born when the exile was going on. So then Abhimanyu was actually trained by Krishna himself in warfare and all those things, right? So of course, glories of Abhimanyu is a different session altogether. But suffice to say today that he was a great warrior. And then we all know how he was like completely destroying the Kaurava armies, and the Kaurava armies had to resort to cheating actually to kill Abhimanyu. They trapped him in the Chakravyuha and then they killed him. And so yeah, and then Abhimanyu and Uttara's son is actually Parikshit, about whom we'll be discussing today. And one thing here, by the way, these are the verses as they are translated by Prabhupada. Shaunak Rishi, he actually puts forth the desire to hear about Parikshit Maharaj. So we see here that he says, we all respectfully want to hear about him, Parikshit Maharaj, to whom Shukadev Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. So here Shaunak Rishi is being humble. He's being, with humility, he is inquiring to Sutta Goswami, right? Sutta Goswami has already in the second chapter glorified this mood of humble questioning, right? These questions that were asked by the sages of Naimisharanya, they were actually glorious, right? What is that verse? I forget the verse anyway. Yat Krishna samprashno yenatma suprasidhati. So all the questions that you're asking, dear sages, are beneficial to everybody in general, to all population, right? So that's why they are glorious. So this is what Sutta Goswami, and we see this humility in questioning, right? And Krishna says in the Gita, tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, right? So how do we question about these spiritual matters? We approach a spiritual master humbly, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. And when we do this, that is when the Tattvadarshi, or the seer of truth, initiates us. Upadekshanti de jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha, right? He shows us the way. So that is how I like to think about it in terms of an analogy that I came up with. So for a current to flow, you need an end of high potential and an end of low potential, right? And then current flows between them. Similarly, when we accept our low potential in front of our guru, in front of our superiors, we acknowledge our low potential, then that's when the current of knowledge seamlessly flows. So that is, I guess, the importance of humility when we ask questions. So yeah, that is one thing. And then later on, Prabhupada, in one of the purports here, he actually kind of gives a background and a context of where we are. So we saw in the previous chapters various things. So Prabhupada writes that, but in the course of the narration of other topics like release of Brahmastra by Ashwatthama, his punishment by Arjun, Kunti's prayers, and Pandava's visit to Bhishma Dev, his prayers when he departed, and then Krishna's departure for Dwarka and his arrival in Dwarka. So all these were discussed. And then now the sages were absorbed in hearing such descriptions, but now they wanted to turn to the original topic. And thus the inquiry was made by Shaunak Rishi. So the subject of the release of Brahmastra weapon by Ashwatthama is renewed. Okay, so we backtrack here a little bit. And I think just before Kunti's prayers start, this is all this, what we'll discuss today is what happens. And then finally, Sutta Goswami starts answering Shaunak Rishi's question. So he first of all glorifies Yudhishthir Maharaj. So Emperor Yudhishthir administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father, Pandu. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So even the heavenly planets, even the denizens of heaven knew about the opulence of Maharaj Yudhishthir. And then they were actually so enchanted by it that they wanted to come here and experience that heavenly opulence of Yudhishthir Maharaj. So this was the kind of opulence, right? We know when the Khandavprastha forest, the Khandav forest was burned down. That time, Krishna actually called. It's a long story in itself, but just a short version. But the Pandavas, they defeat the Rakshasas that used to stay in the Khandava forest, and then the Rakshasa. I think they burned down the forest, and then they want to set up a big city there. And then they approach Krishna, and Krishna calls upon Vishwakarma. Vishwakarma is like the celestial architect. So I did my undergrad in Vishwakarma Institute of Technology. So Vishwakarma is there. Of course, we are nowhere close to what Vishwakarma is, but yeah, his name is there in my resume at least. So he calls upon Vishwakarma, and then Vishwakarma builds this great city, very opulent city of Indraprastha. And this is where the Pandavas live, and the Rajasuya Yajna happens there. And then we know during the Rajasuya Yajna, Yudhishthir offers the highest honor of offering the Arghya to Krishna. So again, Yudhishthir Maharaj's absorption in devotion to Krishna is seen there, right? So this was this Indraprastha city was so nicely built. It was so opulent and so wonderful that Duryodhan became envious. Of course, Duryodhan was by nature envious of the Pandavas, and then this Indraprastha city was even more of a cause for envy for him. And then so all of that actually came out during the dice game. And then but then here the verse says something very nice. Because he was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service, right? Mahaprabhu prays na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagdisha kamaye mamma janmani janmanishware bhavatat bhakti rahito kitve. It's not that, okay, this janam, this birth, give me opulence, next birth onwards, give me your bhakti. No, Mahaprabhu says, no, mama janmani janmanishware, birth after birth after birth, please give me your devotion, O Lord. I don't want dhanam, I don't want janam, I don't want sundarim, right? This is what Mahaprabhu, very high standard of devotion, actually very difficult to get there. In fact, I'm definitely not there. So, and then another place, now these are things of this world, dhanam janam sundarim, right? But what about liberation, right? Satyavrat Muni prays in Damodar Ashtakam, varam deva moksham va mokshva vadimva, nacha anyam rineham vareshadapiha. Okay, so I don't want moksha, I don't want liberation, I don't even want the liberation where I am one of the residents of Vaikuntha. I am one of the residents of the spiritual world. I don't even want that. What I want, I just want this form of yours as Balagopal to always be manifest in my heart. This is what I want. I don't want anything else. So this is, one of the things that we see in pure devotees, that they don't care about any of these other external situations. Narayana parasarvena kutashana bibhyati. Swargapavarga narkeshu apitulyartha darshanam. Okay, they are always dependent on the Lord. So another one related important thing that we learn from Yudhishthir Maharaj and the Pandavas and all Pandavas, Kunti, Draupadi, is that when they were in difficulty, they fixed their consciousness on Krishna, and when they were in opulence, also they fixed their consciousness on Krishna. So when they were, in the exile and all that, they were always devoted to Krishna. And even when, Yudhishthir Maharaj became the king, he did the Rajasuya sacrifice. Always they were completely dedicated to Krishna. So this is one of the symptoms of a pure devotee, where whatever situation in their lives, they are always dedicated to Krishna. Another example, very recent example, is Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada got the instruction to spread this message of Krishna consciousness to the Western world quite in his younger days. And then right from when he got that message, he actually always contemplated on that message, always tried his best to kind of fulfill that wish. So his business went up, very successful. Still he was contemplating his guru's mission. His business crashed completely. Still, he was contemplating his guru's mission. And then, things didn't work out at home. Then he finally took sannyas. still he was absorbed. He was absorbed in fulfilling his guru's mission. And then so much struggle to even get to the US, and then he got here in a cargo ship. He describes it was like a matchbox, being thrown about here and there in the Atlantic, right? He came here with so much difficulty. Again, he such wonderful prayers he wrote. Krishna tava punya habe bhai. E punya koribe jabe radharani guchi habe. So he is writing such wonderful prayers. And Boro Kripa Koile Krishna, he writes when he comes here to the US. And even in all this difficulty, he's devoted to Krishna. And was it very easy after he came here? No. He struggled and struggled and struggled, in the Bowery, amongst the drug addicts and whatnot. They broke all the regulative principles. And then among such people he lived, and he just struggled and struggled. Still, he was always focused on Krishna, always sheltered in Krishna. And then he got everything in the form of the Hare Krishna movement, in the form of so many wonderful disciples. He got everything. People were ready to give their lives for him, right? So from such a low state, actually, from a material perspective, he came to such a high state, but still his devotion to Krishna remained intact, right? So Prabhupada tells also that I was tested twice by Krishna. One is when he took away everything from me, and the second time is when he gave me everything, right? So that is the symptom of these great devotees. Their intensity in bhakti does not depend on the day. So whether it's a good phase of life or whether a very bad phase or the worst phase of life, they are equally intensely sheltered in Krishna. So this is unlike my own experience. Whenever everything is going good, or whenever something is really bad, I intensely pray, Krishna, please, please, please. But then when everything starts going well, then I'm like a little bit slack. I'll chant my rounds late at night. What's the issue? Things like that. So I start taking it for granted. But yeah, if a true pure devotee, a genuine devotee who really wants to connect to Krishna, his bhakti is not dependent on the external circumstances. So we see this example in case of Yudhishthir Maharaj. And imagine, if I had the wealth, so much wealth, that the denizens of heaven are aspiring to come here and be with me, and still, this Yudhishthir Maharaj is devoted to Krishna. So that was his purity, that was his dedication to Krishna. Yeah, so that is one of the lessons. And anyway, continuing, and so the story continues actually. So what happens is, after the war, after the battle of Kurukshetra, Pandavas of course emerge victorious. And then this Ashwathama, who is the son of Dronacharya, he fought from the side of Duryodhan in the war. So he actually wanted to please Duryodhan, and he wanted to kill all the Pandavas. So I think he went in the camp at night, and he killed like 5 people living there, sleeping there. And then he thought he had killed the Pandavas, but actually they were the Upa Pandavas. They were the 5 sons of the Pandavas. Correct me if I'm wrong here. He didn't intend to kill them, right? But he killed them anyway. He did intend to finish off their lineage. But anyway, he killed them, and then he was like very happy that he killed the sons of the Pandavas. And then when Arjuna comes to know, when Krishna, Arjuna, everybody, they come to know that Ashwathama did this grievous thing, they went and captured him. We saw that in one of the previous chapters. And then he was actually forgiven in one sense because of the mercy of Draupadi. But then his hair was cut off and things like that. He was punished in that way. So he was punished. And now what happens is he releases the Brahmastra. Actually, he releases the Brahmastra even before this, when Arjuna also releases a Brahmastra, but then Krishna says, no, this will cause a huge catastrophe. So, retrieve, bring back both the Brahmastras, and Arjuna does that. And then after Ashwathama is punished, now he's really angry. Now he wants to finish off whatever remaining descendants of Pandavas are there. And the one remaining descendant of Pandava is Parikshit, who is in the womb of Uttara. He is the grandson of Arjun. So now he releases a Brahmastra targeted to the baby in the womb of Uttara. And this is when Uttara also takes shelter, and Kunti takes shelter of Krishna. They pray to him, please protect the baby. And that's when Krishna actually he took a form which was as tall as the thumb, and he went into the womb of Uttara. So that picture you see where and then he protected Parikshit from the radiation, right? So the Lord was thus engaged in vanquishing the radiation of the Brahmastra, just as the sun evaporates a drop of dew. He was observed by the child who thought about who he was. So the child is observing Krishna, right? He's observing this 400 form of some divine entity, and then he's wondering who this person is, right? And who is protecting me. So this saving from the radiation, saving from the heat is actually very significant. There is one literature, there is one kind of place in the Gaudiya literature where it talks about extinguishing the fire of material existence. Can anyone tell which is that? Can anyone guess which is that? We all know it. We all know it, and we all know it very well actually. And then okay, another clue, we all at least are supposed to recite it every day.
Cheto Darpanam.
Samsara Davana. Samsara
Yeah,
Davana.
yes, Samsara Davanala Lidaloka. Cheto Darpanam Arjanam Bhavam Mahadav Agni Nirvapanam. Oh, very nice. Yeah. Cheto Darpanam Arjanam also is like that. Yeah. And then this Samsara Dava Nalalida Loka, right? Very beautiful verses, both of these, where so Samsara Dava Nalalida Loka is actually paying respects to the Guru, and the Guru is compared to a cloud. So the cloud actually takes the nectar from the ocean of mercy and showers it on the people who are suffering the heat and fire of material existence, and that's how he extinguishes the fire of material existence, right? So this is how Krishna protects his devotees. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Name Bhakta Pranashyati, right? So now he's practically showing, he has in the entire Mahabharata, he demonstrated this Name Bhakta Pranashyati aspect in so many places. Like, my devotee will never be vanquished. He protects Arjuna, he protects so many other devotees, and then now finally he's also protecting Parikshit Maharaj, right? And that too in such a dramatic way. And Prabhupada says here that like the Lord is all pervading. He's so to say, he can do anything. He's omnipotent, right? So he can be smaller than the smallest, he can be larger than the largest, he can do anything he wants. So that's how he shrinks himself into this little form and goes into the womb of Uttara and protects Parikshit Maharaj. And then that happens, and then when all the stars and all the astrological elements form in a particular good way, the heir apparent of Pandu, who is Parikshit, is born, right? And Yudhishthir Maharaj and all the Pandavas, everyone is very much pleased with the birth of Parikshit, and that's when they call the Brahmanas, the Jataka Vipras, to do the horoscope of Parikshit. And then these learned Brahmanas, headed by Dhaumya and Kripa, recited the auspicious hymns, and a lot of purificatory processes, a lot of samskaras, a lot of vidhis happen. And then Yudhishthir Maharaj gave in charity as well. So this is again a very nice thing, charity. We'll come to that in the end. And then the Brahmanas said, this spotless son has been restored by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, in order to oblige you. They are telling this to Yudhishthir Maharaj. He was saved when he was doomed to be destroyed by an irresistible supernatural weapon. For this reason, the child will be known in the world as the one who is protected by the personality of Godhead. Oh, most fortunate one, there is no doubt that this child will become a first-class devotee and will be qualified with all good qualities. So the Brahmanas are predicting this about Parikshit Maharaj. And then now Yudhishthir Maharaj is inquiring to the Brahmanas, "Oh great souls, will he become as saintly as a king as pious in his very name and as famous and glorified in his achievements as others who appeared in this great royal family? So Yudhishthir Maharaj is inquiring. So I remember one funny example in my own life. So one astrologer, he told my mother that he told my parents that I am actually one of my ancestors who is reborn in the family. And then I somehow caught that. And then because my family would talk, oh no, this astrologer said, this child is actually the ancestor, one of our ancestors reincarnated. And then I used to use that for my mischief. So if I would do something naughty and then my mother would come to hit me, then I would say, look, you cannot hit me, I'm your ancestor reincarnated, right? You cannot offend your ancestor like that. So yeah, so that was the culture during the Vedic times, and even now, that we respect our pitras or our ancestors, and then we kind of try to think that, okay, yeah, is the baby that is going to be born one of our ancestors and things like that. So here Yudhishthir Maharaj is inquiring, will this baby be as great as my ancestors, right? And this is when the Jataka Vipras, these Brahmanas, they start glorifying Parikshit Maharaj and comparing his qualities to various people who exemplified those qualities, so to say, right? So we'll go through these, whatever quality, and then which person or what thing they compare him to, Parikshit Maharaj, to related to that quality. So maintaining his praja or maintaining his subjects. So Parikshit Maharaj is compared to King Ikshvaku. So Ikshvaku is actually the son of Manu. Manu is like he is known as the father of mankind. So within a day of Brahma, there are, I think 14 Manus who are born and they go away. So, and then Manu is actually the son of Brahma. So the son of sun god Vivaswan. So the King Ikshvaku's name comes in Bhagavad Gita 4.1. Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivaswan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakave Bravit. So apparently Ikshvaku was a very great king, and he was very expert and very nicely he maintained his subjects. Then following the Brahminical principles, especially in being true to his promise, okay, he's compared to Lord Ram. And we'll not go into too many details of the characters that we already know. Some of them we'll go into some interesting stories in this list. So munificent donor of charity and a protector of the surrendered. So for this quality, Parikshit is compared to King Shibi of the Ushinara country. So King Shibi was a great king, and he was, as mentioned here, he was a very munificent donor of charity and protector of the surrendered. So there is a story in this connection that once King Shibi was giving donations to all the Brahmanas and other people in his garden, and then these demigods, they knew of his charitable disposition, his great charitable disposition. So Indra and Agni, they decided to test him. So Indra took the form of a dove, and Agni took the form of a hawk, and then they came to the earth. And then this dove, he came to the garden of Shibi, and he went right to the king, and then he was very fearful. He was very fearful, as if he's going to be killed by someone. And then far off, King Shibi saw that this hawk is also coming, as if he's going to kill this dove. And then he comes, and then as a protector of the surrendered, King Shibi is supposed to protect this dove from being eaten by the hawk. So then he says, he tries to protect the dove. And then the hawk starts speaking. The hawk says that, look, you think that, first he asked, why are you protecting this dove? He's my meal, right? And then Shibi says that, no, this dove came to me and surrendered unto me, and he's seeking protection from me. So as a king, I have to give it protection. I have to give him protection. And then this hawk starts reasoning with Shibi. He says, that is okay, you're trying to protect the dove, but then I am also one of your praja. I am also one of your subjects, because I am a part of your kingdom. And this dove is my meal. So if you protect that dove, then I won't get my meal. So that way you are harming me. So how are you a good king? Then Shibi is like, okay, this hawk is actually speaking. That in itself is quite fishy. but okay, let me. And then not only speaking, but reasoning like a human being. So then he says, okay, but still what you say is accurate. So let me think about it. So King Shibi thinks about it, and then he says, okay, you don't kill this dove. I'll give you the flesh that you want. And then the eagle is like, oh, okay, but are you going to kill someone else for the flesh? Then Shibi says, no, absolutely not. Then he says, what are you going to do? So then he says, I will put this dove on one side of the measuring scale, on the what they call it, on the tarazu, they call it in Marathi, one side of the scale, and then I'll keep cutting flesh from my body and keeping it on the other side of the scale. And then whatever weight is of the dove, so the flesh of equal weight from my body you can take, oh hawk. So this is what the King Shibi tells the hawk. So then he puts the dove on one side of the scale, and then he cuts some flesh, keeps it on the other side. Still the dove is heavier. He cuts more flesh. Still the dove is heavier. He keeps cutting more and more flesh. Still the dove looks very small, but he's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And now the king thinks what to do now. And then he finally says, look, this is something mysterious going on here. This dove is like really heavy. So let me do this. Let me sit on the other side of the scale. So he goes and himself sits on the other side of the scale. Now the weights are equal. And then now he says, okay, now since the weights are equal, you can eat me, he says to the hawk. And as soon as he says this, the birds reveal their true identities of being Indra and Agni, the demigod of Indra we know, and Agni is demigod of fire. And then they glorify Shibi, and it's like everybody showers flowers from heaven and things like that. So King Shibi is glorified. And then finally Prabhupada writes that actually King Shibi is a member of the assembly of Yamaraj even now. So he actually got like he got that heavenly planet where he's assisting Yamaraj in his work, in his seva. And then next we'll quickly go through these. So expand the name and fame of his family. So Bharat, Parikshit is compared to Bharat, the son of Maharaj Dushyanta. So Bharatar Shabha, right? So all the Pandavas, they come in the lineage of Bharat, the son of King Dushyanta. So in many places in the Gita, Krishna addresses Arjuna as Bharatar Shabha. And then in case of bowmanship, he's like his grandfather Arjuna. And then in case of strength, he's like a lion. And he, like the Himalaya mountain, he's worthy as a shelter. And then like the earth, like he's compared to earth as far as the quality of forbearance is concerned. And he's tolerant like his parents. And then equanimity of mind. So actually Prabhupada writes that Sridhar Swami, also great commentator on Bhagavatam, he translates this to mean Brahma, Lord Brahma. But according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, another Acharya in our line, the grandfather is actually compared to Yudhishthir Maharaj. Prabhupada says both comparisons are good because both of them are like very great souls. They have achieved the equanimity of mind. And then munificent. Munificent means giving out charity. So that is Parikshit is compared to Shiva, Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva gives out boons very easily. He's known as Ashutosh. He's very easily pleased, right? So that's Lord Shiva. And then the resort for everyone. So that quality, Parikshit is compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, who is even the shelter of the goddess of fortune Lakshmi. And then Parikshit is as good as Lord Shri Krishna in following his footsteps. And then he is very much magnanimous like King Ranti Dev. And then he will be like a connoisseur of religion like Maharaj Yayati. So Maharaj Yayati's story is very interesting. You guys will like this story. So Maharaj, so this goes back a long ago. So there is Shukracharya, who is the guru of the Rakshasas, who is the guru of the demons. And then there is this other demon king called Vrishaparva. So Vrishaparva is actually a kind of disciple of Shukracharya. And they are daughters. So Shukracharya's daughter Devayani and Vrishaparva's daughter Sharmishtha. They are good friends. They are like pals, very good friends. And then they are actually one day bathing in the river or something. And then suddenly Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati appear there. And then when Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati appear there, out of respect, they wear clothes. They are undressed and they are bathing, and they quickly wear clothes. Now what happens is Sharmishtha, the daughter of the king, she, erroneously she wears the clothes of Devyani, like the daughter of Shukracharya, the guru. Now Devyani is completely angry at Sharmishta. How could you do this? How could I am the daughter of Shukracharya, who is a great guru, and you are the daughter of some insignificant king. How can you do this? She rebukes her inside out, and then even Sharmishta gets angry. So she also rebukes her back, and then she pushes Devyani into a well and goes away from there. And then now what happens? This Devyani is in the well, and then King Yayati, who is mentioned here, he comes. He sees that Devyani is in the well, and then he picks her up and then he takes her to her father. And Devyani is exquisitely beautiful, so is Sharmishta. And King Yayati is like, he falls for Devyani initially. And then now he takes her back to her father, and then now Devyani complains that, look, this is what Sharmishta did. This is what the daughter of this insignificant king Vrishaparva did to me. She pushed me. First of all, she wore my clothes. And not only that, she rebuked me. And then on top of that, she pushed me in the well. And then Shukracharya is also angry. How come this insignificant girl do this to my great daughter? And then he calls Vrishaparva. Now Vrishaparva, although he is a king, he still doesn't want to displease his guru Shukracharya. So he says, look, I will give Sharmishta as a maid servant to your daughter. So that's how that's how Sharmishta becomes the maid servant of Devyani. And now Yayati, who picked her up from the well, he has fallen for Devyani, and then they get married. And then because they get married, when Devyani goes to Yayati's palace, her new home, Sharmishta also accompanies her because she's like the maid servant. Now Sharmishta is also exquisitely beautiful, so Yayati also falls for her. And then but Shukracharya doesn't want Yayati to have any connection with Sharmishta, the maid servant. And then but then eventually he falls for her, and then they have a connection, and then they beget a son together. Now when Devyani comes to know about this, she's really angry. She again goes to her father and she complains that, look, this is what my husband did. Yayati did. He fell in love with Sharmishta and all that. He got married to her secretly and things like that. And then Shukracharya is again angry, and then he tells Yayati that, look, you have done I was warning you about this, but still you did this nonsense. So I'll take away your youth. So he curses him to become impotent actually. And then now Yayati is like, he is old and frail, and he has a lot of desire for sense gratification, but he's unable to fulfill those desires. And then Shukracharya, he asks Shukracharya, and then Shukracharya also, when he comes to know that he has begotten a son with Sharmishta, he becomes a little pacified, and then he says, okay, there is one solution. What you do is you can ask one of your 5 sons to exchange their youth with your old age. So that is one way you can come out of this situation. Now Yayati asks all his 5 sons actually. So Yayati, the 5 sons of the first son of Yayati is actually Yadu. So the Yadu dynasty in which Krishna appears starts from Yadu. So he asks Yadu. Yadu says, no, I won't. And then he asks the other 3 sons, they also say no. And then finally he asks his 5th son, the youngest one, Puru. And Puru agrees that, yeah, you are my father. You cannot repay the debt of a father in any life. So yeah, I'm ready to give my youth to you. So then Yayati gets Puru's youth, and then he enjoys sense gratification for a long time. And then, but finally, he gets sick of the sense gratification. Actually, he starts thinking, okay, no, these desires are not ending. They are again and again tormenting me endlessly, right? So there is something else, there is something higher to life. And then that's how he's a pious king. He's a pious king because he does all these sacrifices, he gives charity to the brahmanas and everything. But then he's still not at that level where he could give up sense gratification, but eventually he comes to that level, and then he starts worshipping the Supreme Lord, and then eventually he gives back his youth, the youth that he had taken from his youngest son. He gives it back to him, and then he perfects his life in devotion. So that is the story of Maharaj Yayati. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that although Maharaj Yayati eventually perfected his life, his youth was full of romance and romantic stories and things like that, Prabhupada writes. So this is the story of Yayati, right? So it shows this comes in the 9th canto, and it shows the futility of sense gratification and how eventually we should turn to Krishna. And then in case of patience, Parikshit Maharaj is compared to Bali Maharaj. Again, that's a long story. We'll not get into that. In case of forbearance, he's compared to the earth. And as far as being a staunch devotee of Lord Krishna is concerned, Parikshit Maharaj is compared to Prahlad Maharaj. So this is what the Jataka Vipras, the Brahmanas, they predict about Parikshit Maharaj, his glories, his qualities. And then they continue glorifying him. And then this is really interesting. After hearing about his death, which will be caused by the bite of a snake bird sent by the son of a Brahmana, he will get himself freed from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead, taking shelter of him. After hearing about his death, which will be caused by the bite of a snake bird, oh, I pasted that twice. After inquiring about proper self-knowledge from the son of Vyasadeva, Shukadev Goswami, who will be a great philosopher, he will renounce all material attachment and achieve a life of fearlessness. So this is really amazing. At the birth of Parikshit Maharaj itself, it was predicted that he will be bitten by this snake bird and die, right? And even cursed by this Brahmana boy, Shringi. So why I find this amazing is, even though he knew all of this, he did his duties very well. It's not that he was always paranoid about, snakes, or paranoid about Brahmana kids or something like that. He did his duties very nicely. And then he lived like an ideal devotee. He is the ideal devotee, actually. So yeah, when I think of myself, if I would have known that this is the circumstances in which you will die, I will try my best to be protected from those kind of things. But this is Parikshit Maharaj, who is always dependent on Krishna, Narayana Parasarve, right? And then here Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, since he was always protected by the Lord, he could have avoided the effect of such a curse by the grace of the Lord. But he did not take such undue advantage for nothing. Rather, he made the best use of a bad bargain. For 7 days continuously, he heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the right source, and thus he got shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord by that opportunity. So this will all be covered in detail in the subsequent chapters, actually. And then, so thus those who were expert in astrological knowledge and in performance of birth ceremony instructed King Yudhishthira about the future history of his child. Then, being sumptuously remunerated, they all returned to their respective homes. So now this is where the name Parikshit, the significance of the name Parikshit is given. So this son would become famous in the world as Parikshit, which means examiner, because he would come to examine all human beings in his search after that personality whom he saw before his birth in the womb, right? Thus he would constantly come to contemplate him. So he would always examine, okay, are you that person who saved me? Are you that person who saved me? He would examine very, sharply. So that's why he's known as Parikshit. And then finally, as the moon in its waxing fortnight develops day after day, so the royal prince Parikshit very soon developed luxuriantly under the care and full facilities of his guardian grandfathers. So one of the things that Prabhupada writes in the purport is, so the last verse here, Parikshit developed very nicely under the care and full facilities of his guardian grandfathers. So Prabhupada says that even for the process of bhakti to become nicely fixed in a particular child, it is very important that the parents give the correct exposure to the children. So Prabhupada writes this in the purport, and this is a long purport. I'll read this part. There is a practical example in my personal life in this connection. My father was a pure devotee of the Lord, and when I was only 4 or 5 years old, my father gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister. and I used to imitate the performances of a neighboring temple of Radha Govinda. By constantly visiting this neighboring temple and copying the ceremonies in connection with my own deities of play, I developed a natural affinity for the Lord. And so he continues, how later on these activities were suspended due to my college and school. But then again, they got revived when he met his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. So this way, Prabhupada writes how important it is so he writes here, this was followed up until I left the family connection. And I'm pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace, that is his guru. So Maharaj Prahlad also advised that such impressions of godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity of the human form of life, which is very valuable, although it is temporary like others. So Kaumaram Acharet Pragyo, Dharman Bhagvataniha, Durlabham Manusham Janma, Tadapi Adruvam Arthadam. The 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj is instructing his school friends. So finally, Yudhishthir performs the Ashwamedha Yagya. So now Yudhishthir is actually very sad that so much killing happened in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So he wants to do a horse sacrifice, an Ashwamedha Yagya. But then he doesn't have a lot of wealth too, because this Ashwamedha Yagya is a very costly affair. So then he goes to Krishna, and Krishna tells him that there is this gold-capped mountain in the Himalayas, where the gold was left by King Marutta. So King Marutta was a king many generations before Yudhishthir Maharaj. So he left that there, and then you can go there and get that gold and perform the sacrifice with that wealth. And then all the Pandavas, they go there, get that wealth, and then Maharaj Yudhishthir performs the Ashwamedha Yagya. And then finally, Krishna leaves for Dwarka, accompanied by Arjuna and other members of Yadu dynasty. So this is the chapter actually. So we saw how Parikshit was born, and how Parikshit was glorified by the Jataka Vipras, and then finally how Ashwamedha Yagya was performed by Yudhishthir Maharaj. And finally, reflection time. So in one of the purports, Prabhupada writes, that is Parikshit, could have invoked the mercy of the Lord to save himself, but he did not want to, because he was a pure devotee. A pure devotee never asks the Lord for any undue favor. So one reflection for me is that I should also aspire to come to that level where I'm not a spoiled brat, asking Lord for material comforts. So although I do ask, so the way my mind cheats me is, oh Lord, give me these material comforts. That's how I'll be able to practice bhakti well. That's how my mind cheats me into connecting material comforts to bhakti. But yeah, I should aspire to not be that spoiled brat, but just serve Lord selflessly. One student asked a question to Gaurang Prabhu. Prabhuji, is it okay if we pray to Krishna to get me good marks? And then Gaurang Prabhu said that, yes, you can pray, but then you can also end your prayer by saying that, oh Krishna, please give me the intelligence to ask you the right kind of things when I come to you next time. So this is a nice anecdote that Gaurang Prabhu once mentioned. So, but again, going to Krishna for material desire is definitely better than not going to Krishna at all. So one of the Sukritinas, one of the 4 kinds of people who come to Krishna are those who have material desires, right? Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna, artho jigyasur artharthi dhyani cha bharatarshab, right? So so it's always better to go to Krishna. You can let Krishna decide whether he wants to fulfill those desires or not. But rather than not going to Krishna at all, because if we go to Krishna for material desires, at least that connection is there, and gradually Krishna will purify us. As we see in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, where he went with the material desire of getting a kingdom bigger than his father's. But eventually, when he saw, Vishnu manifest in front of him, he says that, I was asking for broken pieces of glass, but by seeing you, O Lord, I feel like I have obtained diamond, a huge diamond. So yeah, that's how, at least keeping that connection with Krishna, he will slowly purify our material desires and make us selfless. And then the second reflection, O Brahmanas, so one of the purports of Brahmanas, the opulence of the king was so enchanting that the denizens of heaven aspired for it. But because Yudhishthir Maharaj was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service. So one lesson for me here is that material opulences will not satisfy my spiritual thirst. For that, I need to practice the process of devotional service with faith and humility and serve the Lord and the Vaishnavas. So one of the things that today's consumerist culture tries to imbibe in us is the expectation that getting more and more opulences and comforts will make us happy, but these comforts, they do make us cozy, they do make us comfortable, but then I guess I need to remember that it will not give me the ultimate happiness. So at some point I have to turn to spirituality and find my higher purpose in life, and only that will give me full satisfaction. So, and yeah, we saw in the example of Yudhishthir Maharaj that once that level is attained, material comfort or discomfort does not affect our steady pace in bhakti. So the third reflection, this is related to the parenting. I am pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was later developed into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. Prabhupada writes in one of the purports. So this shows the immense responsibility of being a parent. I don't know if you all know or not, but I am going to become a father soon. In the due date is July. So I'm blessed, like I and my wife are blessed with a baby boy. So it is said in the Bhagavatam, Guru na sasyat, svajano na sasyat, pita na sasyat, janini na sasyat, daivam na tatsyan, na patishcha syan, na mochaye diha samupeta mrityam. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. Very strong verse. So I pray for all of your blessings that I can do something worthwhile for my son. And then the next reflection, not finally, three more, including this. The word Tirthavit is significant because the king knew well where and when charity has to be given. Charity is never unproductive or blind. In the Shastra, charity was offered to persons who deserve to accept charity by dint of spiritual enlightenment. So here I was just contemplating this point. So there, I think like there are two types of charity. So one is charity like to uplift ourselves, like giving donations to temple, and because devotees in temple are already elevated, they are already practicing bhakti in a very nice way. So this charity that we perhaps would give to the temple is for my own upliftment. And then there is the other type of charity which uplifts the giver as well as the receiver. For instance, we might give some prasadam to a beggar and things like that, right? So that we also become selfless, we also show our selflessness, as well as the person who takes that prasadam, he also gets spiritually uplifted. So both are important. Next reflection. So ardent hearing from the bona fide spiritual master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge. And there is no need for medical performances or occult mysticism for miraculous effects. The process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. So again, sincere hearing, ardent hearing is very important. It is the beginning of bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, right? So yeah, we already spoke a little bit about this in the beginning. So we all know the importance of hearing. That's where our spiritual life begins, and that's what will purify us and take us to Krishna. Finally, how we live and what we do throughout our life will decide what consciousness we will have at the time of death. So like Parikshit Maharaj, he was always devoted to Krishna throughout his life. So that is why when he got to know that he's going to die in 7 days, the first thing he did is he went to the forest, he gave up everything, and then he inquired about bhakti, right? He inquired about the goal of life. So that is what it is, right? Whatever is close to my heart throughout my life, that is what I will remember at the time of death. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajityante kalevaram. And whatever I remember at the time of my death, that state I will attain in my next life. Krishna promises this in the Gita, right? And then he says, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram, right? The best way is, the best way to die is by remembering Krishna. So etavan sankhya yogabhyam swadharma parinishthaya janma labha parapumsam ante narayana smritihi, right? Whatever you do your sankhya yoga, you do your ashtanga yoga, you do your swadharma, occupational duty, janma labha, whatever you do, eventually that should kind of facilitate ante narayana smriti, remembering Narayan or remembering Krishna at the time of death. So very high state of realization, but I definitely do aspire for it. And this is all possible because of devotee association. So to live in a devotional way, so as to remember Krishna at the time of death, is only possible by devotee association. Can't do it alone. It's actually no one's cup of tea. Prabhupada says, if you think you can perfect Krishna consciousness alone, he says you're insane. Very strong words. And then, that was the last reflection. That's pretty much it from my side. If there are any feedback, comments, questions, please go ahead.
That was amazing, Jitendra Prabhu. You took us on a train ride. It was very fast. Boom, 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 boom. So many points, but there was so much nectar in there. There were pastimes. There was deep philosophical points. There were so many lessons, realizations, amazing points. I mean, I've made a long list of things that I like, but I just want to see if anybody has any questions. And then I have some questions and comments also. But if anybody else wants to ask anything or share anything, Vishal, go ahead.
Oh, it's Lekha Mataji, she is, and I can go after her.
Sorry, Lekha Mataji, I didn't realize that hand. There's some picture
no.
behind, so I didn't see the hand. Sorry.
No problem, Prabhu. Jitendra Prabhu, Hare Krishna. First of all, congratulations. There is no doubt that you will be an amazing dad. I was actually, I have my friend from LA, and she was doing yoga and listening to the class. She just came out and she was like, this person sounds so well read, and this class is like so nice. So it was amazing class with lot of lessons and lot of information to carry over. And I really like the point. I think it's something that I saw in my life too, like, the importance of nurturing spirituality when as a for someone who's from the childhood, because my parents and my grandmom, they always had that vibration going on, but then I grew up as an atheist for like the most of my teenager. And then somehow whatever seed they sowed, and even after my grandparents passed away, that seed still remained. And then I, by mercy, of course, Krishna's mercy, I was able to like somehow try to like at least be open to thinking about soul and stuff. So thank you for that. And really tells about how, irrespective of whatever opulences you have or you don't have, where your consciousness to be. I think it's a very difficult, exactly like how you were mentioning, when I'm in distress I can always reach out, but when I'm happy, then my consciousness is like all elated, and so it's very important to keep that in mind. So thank you for that reminder. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. It's all there in the purports. I didn't do anything. Great.
Vishal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Amazing class. I didn't know about Parikshit Maharaj having so many like great qualities and great glorification. So one question I had regarding that is, because he was in the womb and the astrologers came and they said so many, like King Gayati, Lord Ram, and like Arjun, so many things. So how he, during his life, he got all those? I mean, was it like already given to him? I mean, how did he like became such a nice devotee? Was there some previous birth where he was like a great devotee?
I think so. I mean, because the Brahmanas were able to predict at birth itself, so I would definitely think that it's something from the previous birth. Now, Prabhupada writes in one of the purports that because he was a pure devotee, that is why Krishna saved him in the womb. One of the reasons that Krishna saved. So yeah, definitely it came from previous birth, and that it got even more concrete because he witnessed Krishna in the womb. So yes, that is definitely true. It's coming from a previous life. But then again, right, it's we will, even though one might have a lot of spiritual background from a previous life, still the free will is always there to turn away or go more towards Krishna. So that is where Parikshit Maharaj actually demonstrated that he actually used his free will to go even closer to Krishna. So I don't know much about his life. Maybe it is there in Mahabharat, but at least the Bhagavatam, so the childhood is talked about, and then immediately the thing where he, now we'll see in the subsequent chapters where he chastises Kali personified, and then the whole pastime where he puts that snake in the neck of Shamik Rishi, and then Shringi curses and all that. So there is not much information, at least in Bhagavatam, of his life in between those two instances. But yeah, definitely he was a pure devotee since birth. I mean, even before birth, from his previous life. I don't know if there is anything spoken about his previous life. Yeah, you can add Prabhuji, Gaur Kumar Prabhu.
It reminds me of Prabhupada, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard anything also about his previous life.
It's like Prabhupada, right? He was, there was predicted so many things he would do.
Yes.
108 temples, everything was predicted.
Yeah.
One thing I also, I used to feel that, what is this? It was already predicted for these great souls, right? So what's the big deal in them doing all these things? Yeah, Prabhupada, it was predicted Prabhupada will open 108 temples. Yeah, so he opened. It was a prediction. It had to happen anyway. But then later on, after hearing some lectures, I understood that although it is predicted, although that devotion is there in their heart, the struggle that they go through is very human. The struggles that they go through is actually very real. So although they have that, they actually set an example that even though they go through that struggle, how they maintain their bhakti. So that is what Prabhupada demonstrates. That is what Parikshit Maharaj also definitely has demonstrated, I would say. So.
Yeah, and also one more thing. So Yudhishthira Maharaj didn't have the riches to do the yajna. So he had to go to King Maruta, and being the king of like entire world, right? Why he didn't have the riches? Was it like so pious that only he would take and spend?
Yeah, so Prabhupada writes in the purport that most of the wealth was spent in the war. So the war is a very costly affair, and this was like Mahabharat. It was like a world war, you can say, much bigger than the world wars that we. In fact, if you know, one of the very, very major reasons why British left India. Of course, this is debatable. I don't want to get into that debate. Yes, freedom fighters worked and Gandhi worked and all that. But then one of the major reasons why British left India is because they didn't have resources to rule over India, because they had lost all their resources in the World War. So that's why they left. So just a world war of this world, in the contemporary times causes so much, expenditure. You can imagine how that might be. It's like the entire world being divided into two armies and fighting, and a lot of expenditure. So that's what Prabhupada writes. And then they go. Yeah. There is very nice things about that King Maruta also. We didn't have time, so I didn't cover. But yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Amazing class. Love the reflections also. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavat pranams. I joined late. I got pulled into a meeting.
Oh, no.
But I did join from the episode of Shukracharya's daughters from there. Yeah, and so it was so nice. Your class was so nice, and your the way you quote Sanskrit verses, it just flows off your tongue. So it's so wonderful, and it's so nice to hear. And congratulations on the arrival of the baby. I'm sure that there is a nice pure soul that is waiting to come to your house, Prabhu, because you've kept kept everything ready for that soul to appear. And so and I had I loved all your reflections. All the reflections were great. I had one question for you. This was about wealth, about opulences, and your personal reflection about opulences and the need for opulences. But I've also read that there should be enough money in a person's life so that the worry of money goes away. So what is the right balance? What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on what is the right amount of money, and when do we know that we are going too far, or when do we know that we are not gone enough? Now, how do we think about that, Prabhu?
It's a very deep question, and a very big question for a small person like me, to be honest. But it's very individualistic. The balance is very individualistic. It's not the same for everyone. So you have devotees like Krishna Chandra Prabhu, who is like a huge businessman, and then in Radhanath Maharaj's congregation, and you also have devotees who are not that well off financially, but they are practicing very sincerely. So yeah, that balance is actually one of the things that I had heard in Krishna House. Gaur Kumar Prabhu, Vishal Prabhu will remember this. Nitya Mataji also. This Rasanath Prabhu had given the talk. So the balance is when you kind of have a pinch. So he said that when you balance something, there is tension, right? So when we try to balance our material and spiritual lives, we need to feel a kind of pinch when we do those things. So for us, we won't feel the pinch if we go too much into materialism, but we will feel the pinch if we go towards spirituality. So the balance, I guess, is where you feel the pinch. After going how deep, you start feeling the pinch. And that, how deep, what that depth is will differ with people, right? For somebody, it might be something. For somebody else, it might be something. So yeah, it's a deep question, Prabhu. And yeah, different devotees have different opinions, and it's huge. We can discuss this, in detail some other time, but that's what I feel, I guess. The pinch has to be felt. I don't feel that pinch sometimes. That means I have to understand that I'm more towards materialism now. So
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. That was a nice reflection. And what I heard from what you said is, I also heard that class, that discussion, the fireside chat that
exactly. Yeah.
I also heard that. And so yes, you should feel that the pinch, and you should feel the tension, and maybe that is the element of tapasya that is needed. And
yes,
but that austerity doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be as severe too. Is the other thing that I've heard. It has to be just right, so that it doesn't, the complacency doesn't set in. Maybe something like that is what I'm understanding from what you just said. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, definitely. And complacency shouldn't set in, and it has to be the right amount. If too much we get into that, then it will just obstruct a lot of things, and especially our dependence, right? Especially when somebody is dependent on us in the setup of a family life. It's not just us, it's our family as well. So if I in the name of spirituality, let's say if I take a job which pays a very, very low salary, and then I'm not able to maintain my family well, so that is not something that I would find right. So something like that. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Krishna Prabhu. Sudhanshu joined during almost towards the end, 9:52. So,
I'm sorry, Prabhu. I slept
no,
off.
that's okay. That's okay.
Oh, don't worry.
You don't have to apologize.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. And so I just have question on Krishna Prabhu's, I have questions on your answer. So you said you should be feeling a pinch, and my interpretation of it is that you should be serving, and while serving you should feel that pinch. So towards materialistic side, are you trying to say there is no end goal, but until unless you are involved in spiritual life and you are still feeling the pinch, it's fine, even if you try to make your material life more richer?
I would say, yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. There is nothing against making your material life richer. It's completely okay. What is condemned in the Shastras is that one-dimensional thing that my material life is everything, my swadharma is everything. Tyaktva swadharmam charanambujam harer bhajan apakva napate tato yadi yatra ko vabadram abhudamushyakim kovarta apto bhajatam swadharmatah. So what this verse says is, so even if you do your swadharma very well, But if you don't do bhajan, if you don't do seva, or you don't practice bhakti, then even if you're perfect in your swadharma, eventually it's not okay. Fine, you did your swadharma. From your next life, you start from zero again, and you keep repeating that life after life, right? But then this verse actually says something else. If you do something for bhakti, and in that process, if you are a little bit short on your material life, that is still okay, because you did bhakti. That credit is eternal. That doesn't go away with the end of life. So it's like a graph. You can become rich materially, go up to maybe, just hypothetically, if on 100 level, okay, you go up to 80 in one life and then you die. It's not that you start from 81 in your next life. You start from zero again, and then you have to work your way up, right? But that's not the case in spirituality. Neha Bikramanashosti, right? Whatever you do, whatever little practice you do, that will be put in like an eternal spiritual bank account. So if you, let's say, complete your process of bhakti 30% in this life, you can actually start from 31 from next life. Krishna promises that. And he promises it in a very practical way. He says that not only you will have those impressions in your mind, but you will be put in a situation where those impressions will come out, and then you will continue from where you left off. So it's quite practical in that way. In the 6th chapter, Krishna talks about that. So yeah, there is no problem with becoming richer materially.
So is this 6th chapter in Bhagavad Gita or like?
Sorry, Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Jitendra Prabhu. I just have a few questions and comments, but if anybody wants to leave, please feel free to leave. So first of all, yeah, I'll just stop the recording in a bit, but next week is going to be His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. So he'll be giving a talk, and hopefully after that it's going to be Shamanand Prabhu. And then, yeah, and then some of us are going to India after that. So we'll see. Okay, so I will stop the recording here.